Yeah, so I was like, so hi, I'm Professor Micah. I've been teaching astrology at divination since 2020. So we're going on like 5 years now. I've been an astrologer for 13 years now, doing it professionally for I think about 3 years, where I've been making money off of it. But I was self-taught for the first 10 years, and then um, I went into like a formal program for Hellenistic astrology, which is essentially ancient astrology. What we know now that's very popularized is going to be more like modern astrology. They both mingle within each other. Hellenistic astrology came first, and then modern astrology is obviously modern. It's what we kind of took from Hellenistic astrology. Modern astrology is going to be more like, I guess, like psychological. Um, in nature, and then Hellenistic astrology I think is like the biggest like differentiating line is going to be about how we interpret more so transits or like events rather than how it relates to just us. It's not a psychological kind of evaluation only, even though it can be used for that for sure. But if we want to also do like introductions, that would be nice. And we can do for like a introduction, like icebreaker question. We can do if you know your sun, moon, and rising, let me know. Also, I'm a Capricorn rising, Pisces sun, and moon in Taurus. And so that's my answer to the intro question. But if anybody wants to start, you can just let me know your name, how much do you know about astrology? Are you excited for the course? And then your sun, moon, and rising.
I don't even know what my rising is.
It's okay
I
if you also don't know if you don't know your rising.
I am River. I don't know that much, but I know my sun, moon, and rising. It's
Okay.
Aries, Cancer, and Aquarius.
Okay. So you're an
Oh,
Aries rising, a
Sorry, I'm
Cancer
an
sun.
Aries sun, Cancer, moon, Aquarius rising.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Cool. Nice to meet you, River.
uh, hello, Ashasu Robin. I am Robin. I know very little Lithuanian. That's about as much as you're gonna get out of me as hello, I am Robin. Um,
That's cool.
my sun is Aries. My moon, waning Aquarius.
Nice.
And then stop that. And then my ascendant is Taurus, and my descendant is Scorpio.
Nice.
Um,
Okay.
that's I only know that because I have an app on my phone that gives me all my planets, my angular points, my lunar nodes, and some like other, which is I guess I looked into it and it's like asteroids that pass by Earth.
Yeah.
Uh,
A- Asteroids
so
are amazing. I love asteroids. One of these days I'll have to teach a class just on asteroids. But I
I
do have a little like series just for the academy that's going on right now about Midas, which is an asteroid. I don't know if you guys have seen those videos, but I like deep diving into asteroids is one of my favorite things.
uh
Okay, Melissa.
but
Oh, sorry.
funny enough, my 12th house is Aries, and that
Uh-huh.
is the house I have the most things in. It has five. So
I get
Nice.
so confused at the houses.
we'll get
Yes,
there.
we will get there. We are building from the bottom up. And so I think houses come in after we talk about planets, depending on, because I said, I don't know if everybody heard, I'll be going a little bit off script. What you call it? The handouts that I'm showing on screen are from, I made these like years ago. And the information on them is still very relevant, but I will probably summarize a lot of this, and if you want to read it and take notes from it or whatever, you can do that either during class or on your own time, but I'll probably be summarizing a lot of this stuff because I made this, I remade this these handouts after I had gone through my formal program. So I was like heavy on vocabulary during that time. I was like, oh, I know all these new words. But that is not how I read. It's not how I teach. I was just having fun with new things that I had learned. And I realized looking back at it that I was doing the most. So, so I'm going to summarize a lot of this. Melissa, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. I love the banter. It's wonderful as always. My name is Melissa. I have been, I guess, into astrology, gosh, like forever, since I was maybe 15. That's a long time ago. And I've taken a couple classes that I paid for. There's this guy called Fixed Air Moon. His name's Brian. Don't know his last name off the top of my head, but I enjoyed his teachings. It was fairly basic, but yeah, I know a few things. I just don't know the angles and the different mathematical sort of expressions of how the asteroids and the planets and the celestial bodies sort of influence the other when they're aspecting. So that part of it is what I really want to learn. I'm a Capricorn sun, Virgo moon, and Aquarius rising.
Nice.
Glad to see there's another Aquarius rising. I love when I meet other fellow Aquarians.
Awesome. Okay. So so when we're talking about all this stuff, like, yeah, you can read this kind of at your own leisure, whether it's in class or not, I don't mind. But I'll just giving a fair warning, I'm going to probably be going through a lot of this stuff, I guess, relatively quickly, because I won't be reading it off. But so let's start with masculine and feminine energy. I think the easiest way to understand masculine and feminine energy is, one, we have to remember that it's not the same, I guess, definition as how we use it in the US, which is going to be like very much like, I guess, gender based. It's more so about masculine energy in astrology terms is going to be about, is it active or is it like in your face? That's how I remember it. Masculine energy, it happens very quickly. It's very literal. You don't have to really search for the meaning that much. It's just there. Feminine energy is going to be a bit more receptive, and it's going to be a bit more subtle. You'll have to search for the meanings a little bit more. They're a bit more like spiritual. I think the way that I literally think about it is like feminine energy is a bit more like woo-woo than masculine energy. Masculine energy is like straight to the point. It's on the page. That's what it is. Feminine energy, you have to search for the meaning a little bit more. And and I guess sometimes it's hidden. So if we think about the different sides of, we haven't gotten to zodiac signs yet, but when we do, or even I think the next handout is going to be planets. And so when we get to that handout, you'll hear me talk about like, oh, the masculine side of Mars is Aries, but the feminine side of Mars is Scorpio. So the difference between those two would be Mars is automatically going to be the planet that has to do with conflict, aggression, hard work, all of those like very fiery things. And it's masculine energy. So we get that in Aries. We get enthusiasm. We get the spark of energy. We get like literally the cutting off or heat that comes in Aries that we see a lot of. We see that when Aries like is quick to start something, but also very quick to cut things off and not finish them. And so we're seeing the masculine side of Mars. But in Scorpio, we're seeing the feminine side of Mars, which you have to search for to get Scorpio's meanings. You have to search for it a little bit more. So Mars is still expressing itself, but it's expressing itself, I guess, in a bit more of a more subtle way, more spiritual way. And so it's going to be like, I'm cutting through like the proverbial BS and looking for what's underneath. So there's still cutting happening, but it's just not literal anymore. Whereas in Aries, it's very literal. Like if you have an Aries, like if you have planets that are going through Aries, oftentimes you'll see a lot of people getting into accidents. You'll see a lot of people like nicking themselves with knives. You'll see people like getting into arguments. Scorpio doesn't do all that. You might see Scorpio energy cause chaos, yes, but it's a lot more underneath the surface. It's going to be more about, it's not just about yelling, it's about like stirring the pot a little bit that creates the chaos. And so it's a bit more behind the scenes. So that's how I would think about masculine versus feminine energy. Feminine energy is more behind the scenes. Masculine energy is on stage for everybody to see. So that's how you would think about masculine and feminine. And those are going to be important because when we're looking at Aries through Pisces, you're starting with Aries that's going to be masculine, and then you're just alternating. So Taurus is feminine, Gemini is masculine, Cancer is feminine, Leo is masculine, and you're going to go back and forth like for all the signs. And if you've done it right, then you should have Pisces as a feminine sign. And so that is going to be masculine and feminine energy for what you need to know about that. Modes, or what could also be called triplicities. In Hellenistic astrology, they're called triplicities, but they mean the same thing because there are 3 of them. But modes are going to be essentially like, I don't know why I think of it this way, but I almost think about it like, and this might not be right, but I think about modes as kind of like gear shifts on a car. Or I even think about it as like different stages of a train moving. So cardinal energy is going to be like a train when it is first like picking up speed, leaving the train station. It's that initial movement from not doing anything and staying still to actual movement that's happening. It's the energy that it takes to push things forward. And so that's when we see like Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra being called cardinal signs. Those are all cardinal energies, but also those are going to be all the equinoxes and the solstices that are happening at those times. So they're marking, in tropical or Western astrology, they're marking the literal turning point of a season. They're marking a new time where something has stopped and something new is beginning. And so we're seeing that what are we in now? We're in Gemini season, which we'll get to in a second. But when we get to Cancer energy, it's almost like in the last few days of Gemini, it's like the train has stopped. And in Cancer energy, it's starting to go again, but it's in a new direction, if that makes sense. So think of cardinal energy as the energy that it takes to get something from a stagnant like state to getting it moving. And it's going to be also the 4 equinoxes or the solstices, 2 equinoxes, 2 solstices. So they're literally marking a new season. We'll also see this same idea come into play when we talk about houses, but we'll get to houses eventually. Fixed signs or solid signs, they're called solid in Hellenistic astrology. Fixed signs are going to be like the epitome of each season. If we're going to use that train station example, this is when the train is no longer like getting out of the station. It is on the tracks, on its way, picking up speed. It is full speed ahead. It's gaining momentum. There is no stopping it. There is no like sharp turns. It has to keep going how it's going. And which is where we're also getting that fixed sign energy when we're talking about, I guess, like stereotypes of fixed signs that are like when we talk about like Taurus and Scorpio and Leo and Aquarius are stubborn. It's not necessarily that they're stubborn. It's just they're very focused on what is happening. They're gaining momentum. So fixed energy wants more of what cardinal energy has already fed it. I'm trying so hard not to go on a tangent here. So if I pause for a second, it's literally me trying to reroute my brain. But yeah, so we have um, solid or fixed energy. It's building momentum. It's gaining more speed on whatever the cardinal sign before it, or cardinal energy before it started with. I wanted to say something else about fixed energy. Fixed energy. So we were talking about the timing of cardinal energy, which is going to be like the equinoxes and the solstices. Fixed energy or fixed seasons or fixed signs or whatever are always going to be the middle month of that season, or you can even think about it as being like the epitome of that season. So like if we think about Leo season, when we think about summer, we're thinking about like being on the beach, the sun, it's hot outside. We are no longer experiencing a lot of like rain or like the temperature going up and down. We are thinking like we could get sunburned, that kind of thing. That's what we think about when we think about summer. So it's no surprise that Leo season is that month or that season that summer is, because that's what we think of when we're thinking about summer, is essentially Leo season. It's in the dead in the middle of that season where not a lot is changing during that time. If anything, things are getting hotter. We can even switch this to Scorpio season. In Libra season, we see the trees start to change color, and fall is kind of in the air. We still see a little bit of like fluctuation, but in Scorpio season, we have gotten like we've gotten like the leaves falling completely off of the trees. At Scorpio season, the trees are basically bare. It looks like fall, like what we imagine in fall. We also get like more spooky season during Scorpio season as well. And then we can even look at it from Aquarius season's perspective. Aquarius is during winter. We think about snow. We think about not wanting to go to work because it's cold outside. And that's happening usually during Aquarius season. There aren't any more warm days like there might be you might get that in Capricorn season, like every once in a while, or you might not get warm days. You might get days without snow, but you are like dead in the middle of winter in Aquarius season. You're definitely getting snow if you live like where I live. And so you want to think about it that way, is that the fixed signs or the fixed seasons are going to be the middle of a season, the month in the middle of each season, or they're going to be the epitome of what you think of for each season, for like fall, spring, winter, summer. Finally, we have the mutable or double-bodied signs. Double-bodied is what it's called in Hellenistic astrology, but it's also called double-bodied because you're literally taking I always have to think about this, the fixed sign that came before it, and then the cardinal energy that's coming after it, and you're just putting them together. And that's how you get the mutable signs. So essentially, mutable seasons and like people that hold mutable energy, a lot of like mutable energy, are just like cocktails. That's what I think. They're just like mixtures of stuff. Granted, like all the seasons are going to be mixtures in some way, like because all of the signs except for Aries like have something to compound off of. But even then, you kind of get some Pisces going into Aries. But again, we'll get into that in a second because I'm trying not to do that many tangents. So we see with mutable energy, it's taking a little bit of both. It's literally sandwiched between two energies, and it's just taking a little bit of both of them and then creating like this transitional space that's happening within it. So Gemini season, we're in Gemini season now. So we're seeing a little bit of Taurus season, which is a spring season. So we're still seeing a lot of growth that's happening from Taurus season, but we're also starting to see a little bit of a pivot or like a spike in temperature. I think like that's the best way, like in spring, between spring and summer, to differentiate. At least from my perspective. If anybody knows any other ways to differentiate spring from summer, like, because I garden sometimes, but I'm also a chaos gardener. So I just kind of like throw seeds and hope that it all works. And so anyway, we can see that one of the biggest differentiators between spring and summer is that in spring, we'll maybe have temperatures in like the 50s and 60s. But in summer, we start to see the temperatures kind of go up to like 70s, 80s, depending on where you live. But in Gemini season, we'll start to see some fluctuations. So some days it might be in the 60s, other days it might be 80s. And so you're starting to see like some sort of transition. Something is happening where it's no longer purely spring, but it's not yet summer yet. So think about mutable energies or signs or seasons as like a transition time. If we're using the train metaphor, this is going to be the time where the train is approaching the train stop. It's slowing down, but it has not stopped yet. And so that's going to be like that transition time if we're going to use that train metaphor as well. And so, okay. Any questions on that before we go to elements? Okay, so then we have elements, which are going to be fire, air, earth, and water. We have fire and air being the masculine energies. Oh, hold on a second. Just to kind of backtrack for a second. All of these modes, I've listed them in order because that's the order that they're going to be in, just like we had masculine and feminine energy. Masculine energy is the one that we start off in with Aries, and then we just alternate. It's the same for all of these. I put them all in order, in the order like this on purpose, so that if you ever wanted to like match things up, because eventually we'll like build on these. So the first sign in the zodiac is Aries. So it's going to be a masculine energy. And then it's going to be a cardinal energy as well. And then we're looking at it. We're about to do elements, but it would be a fire sign. So all of these are in order that you would start alternating them in. And so for the modes, you would have Aries as cardinal, Taurus is fixed, and then Gemini is mutable. Cancer is cardinal, Leo is fixed, and then Virgo is mutable. And you would just alternate them like that. And if you've done it right, you should have Pisces as a mutable sign. That's feminine. And so, okay, so then we get to elements. Elements, fire and air are going to be the elements that are masculine. And then earth and water are going to be the ones that are feminine. There we go. And so when we think of fire, I think a lot of people think about fire as action. You're free to think of fire as action. I could see why a lot of people would think that. But I think fire can be so much more than that, because I think fire is more so the belief of something, or like that initial spark that happens internally versus it happening externally. Because fire is like the enthusiasm that you have before you start doing anything. It is literally me trying to fight going on tangents because I'm excited about what I'm talking about. It's a mix of air too, but we're saying like that enthusiasm that makes you want to take action, or that or even if we're saying maybe it's not enthusiasm, maybe it's anger that makes you want to take action and makes you want to cause conflict. That would be more of an internal thing than a actual like external thing just yet. Both are parts of fire, I think, but definitely going to be two things that we can look at, like I guess two sides that we can look at with fire. Air is the thought that that we can kind of look at when we're kind of putting these two together. And so it can be like different pathways. Oh, also, sorry, going back really quick. So the way that I got a lot of these different interpretations, because I think that's important to, like I said, I wasn't going to read anything off, but I do think this is important to talk about. So in the handouts, I put in two like example physical traits of fire, because that's all, essentially all we're doing is taking the physical traits of fire and then like I'm like, I need to find another word for this, but like spiritualizing it, like like making it a metaphor. And so like fire is bright, it creates light. And so if we keep going with that idea, then in making them into like traits, because not everybody is glowing like a fire sprite or like a glowworm. At least I hope not. And so, but if we make that into like regular people traits, then fire would be unashamed or just very blunt, very out there, like as far as like, just being what it is. They being very raw. It can also be like extroverted. It has a lot of enthusiasm, which I guess we could also take from brightness. And then we could get like confidence. I put spirit and intuition because I actually am going to amend intuition, because intuition, I had an argument with ChatGPT about this like a couple days ago, the difference between instinct and intuition. They are two different things. I will concede they're two different things, but I will say that they are fraternal twins. So fire isn't necessarily intuition. It is instinct though. One is instinct is going to be, I think, more internalized, or not internalized. Yeah, like internalized in the body. It's more about survival. I would argue that so is intuition, but I think they could definitely intermingle. Instinct is going to be more of a fire thing though. And so, but one could say that instinct is your body's intuition. Anyway, but also fire provides heat. And if we make those into real pupil traits, you could say passionate, courageous, destructive as like a negative, creative, impulsive, or even egotistical. Oh, but I also brought up spirit with the brightness, because if you look at like any mythology with fire, a lot of times fire in spirituality is used as a metaphor for like spirit or enlightenment and things like that. And so that's why I put spirit there as well, which we could take even further, but we're not going to do that today. And but like that's what all of these are. I did just want to understand. I did just want to explain what all of this is, what's happening here. But air, we think of air as kind of like, I think of it as kind of like this ether that we're all kind of pulling on. It's literally how we communicate with each other, how you guys are hearing me and I'm hearing you, how we're like talking to each other. It's that interconnectedness, like that's invisible, that unseen space that's happening that allows people to connect, whether it be internally or externally, because none of us have had a completely unique thought. We're all kind of just pulling on thoughts that exist out there somewhere. Nobody's had a original thought. Somebody has always thought about a thought that, at this point at least, I'm sure there was an original thought at some point, but we're all kind of like pulling on the same thoughts at some point in time. It's out there. It's just a matter of who believes it or not. But we can look at air as more like intellect. Air is going to also be, I think, a bit harder to nail down when we're talking about, I mean, it's not hard to nail down, but if we're looking at like traits, it's a bit more unpredictable because you can't see it. Literally, you can't see air. And so air can literally just, as an element, can just be a bit more scattered as far as what it manifests as. Even if you're looking at like the wind that's happening outside. The wind is very agile. It's going one moment, like it could be going, hopefully not 15 miles per hour in your city, but like, and then you can have that time where it just kind of like pauses and then keeps going. But there is not a lot of predictability to air. And so I'd listed out a couple ways that we can look at air in this section right here. And for Earth, you can think about Earth as more the action that comes from fire, which is, I think, like my own like little tangent that I also love to go on, because I'm like, I think Earth and fire signs could go really well together, but I digress. Because Earth is going to be, how do we make all this enthusiasm real into something real? Earth is going to be tangible. It's literally tangible, but also we're looking at it being, taking something that's maybe a bit more unseen and making it actually a holdable thing. So we could think about Earth as being a bit more grounding. Flow is another thing with Earth. If you're literally looking at like how plants grow, it takes time. And so Earth is always going to be about, there is an order of things. There's a natural progression of things. And so every Earth sign or every Earth element, or sorry, not Earth element, Earth season is going to be a bit slower. It's going to be a bit more lax. Even Capricorn, that's the cardinal energy, is going to be a bit slower. It's going to be a bit more, maybe not strategic, but practical. Practical just means common sense, because I think that was like my biggest like pet peeve when I was reading a lot of astrology books, is it said that air signs are analytical and earth signs are practical, because to me those mean two, like almost the same thing. It's not, though. Essentially what it's saying is that air signs are really good at, if you have like point A, B, and C, then air signs will say, can I take out point B and still get to point C? If yes, cool, we'll take out point B, we'll take out the middleman. But earth signs or earth energies will say, no, this is the natural progression. We're going to do point A, B, and C, and there is no changing it. So earth is a bit more rigid as well. It can also be materialistic. So that's where we get obviously money from. It's a bit more dependable, again, because it's solid. It's not going anywhere, predictable too, and just kind of like a bit slower because it's more natural process oriented. And then we have water. Water is almost like air as well, which is also a thing. I'm like, I think water and air signs could be cousins. Because there's not a lot of, you can put water in a container, but on its own, it doesn't have a shape. And so it's very changeable already. But water is, I think, like my favorite metaphor for water is like that. There was an experiment or like a science experiment about like the different kinds of tears that you cry. They literally look different under a microscope. So like happy tears look different than sad tears. Those look different than angry tears under a microscope. And I think that is so incredibly like powerful for when we look at it in astrology, because water's, the emotion that we talk about with water literally changes how it shows up. So we can get mystery, because again, there's some unpredictability there. Whenever you look at water as well in nature, if you're looking at like a river or like a lake, we'll use a lake instead as an example. You can see the top of it, but you're really not sure about how deep water goes. And so it's oftentimes water is used as a metaphor for the subconscious, which I would agree with in astrology as well. There are things that are happening very much underneath the surface emotionally that we're seeing with water. And so water, yes, it's more emotional, but I think it's also about your intuition. And I think that's where we get like the intuitive psychic kind of like thing with water. I also argue that as well, because I have met some water signs that maybe we'll say that they ignore that part of themselves, but I've definitely met some not so in touch water signs. And that's speaking from me as being a water sign on my own. But any questions with the elements that we have before we move on?
No
Okay.
questions. I just wanted to say that I enjoy your interpretation. I think they're pretty good, pretty awesome, in fact.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I try to make it as easy to understand as possible because I'm like, yeah, the deeper astrology itself is complex, but and there's a lot of vocabulary that sounds nice, but I don't think it has to. I think sometimes when we get too focused on the vocabulary or like how things are typically interpreted, it makes things a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And so I always try to make sure that it's like as simple as possible, because it's essentially we don't need to use all the vocabulary, you just need to know what it means. I initially put this table here because I was using it to do that alternating that we were talking about. I don't really want us to do that now because I think when I was teaching this class like to somebody else a couple weeks ago, I realized that it no longer like I no longer agreed with it. So we're just gonna ignore this right here. Or it's not that I disagree with it, but for the purposes of this lesson, I disagreed with putting that there. And so we're just gonna pretend that it's not there. This, however, we are gonna use. This is the Thema Mundi. It's a Hellenistic astrology thing. I think this is probably one of the biggest like things that modern astrology does not talk about at all, and I think it's such a disservice. I can talk. Such a disservice not to include this in modern astrology because we get a lot of good stuff from it. The Thema Mundi is essentially the birth chart of the universe in like a very vague sense. So essentially what you're taking is the two planets or the two like luminaries or the signs from the two luminaries, the sun and moon, and you're putting those as like the focal point. So in the Thema Mundi, you have the moon literally as the universe's ascendant, as the mother. And so then right after that, you would put Leo as, I guess, like the second house. It's not important necessarily first or second house. It's more important that we are starting with the luminaries, the sun and moon, because the sun and moon give light, but they also symbolically also give life. The sun literally gives life. We couldn't live without the sun or sustain life without it. And then, of course, the moon has its own importance as being, a time when we rest. It's a time of change that's also happening as well. I bring this up because when we're looking at different ways to understand not only the opposites when we're talking about zodiac signs, seasons, whatever, essentially a lot of that is coming from the Thema Mundi. You don't have to know, you should know what signs are opposite, but I think what's even more important is understanding the difference of opposing planetary energies. And that's what I think is really great about this Thema Mundi. Because every luminary or luminary energies essentially oppose Saturn energy all the time. So the moon is going to be opposite a Saturn ruled sign, and the sun is going to be opposite Saturn on the Thema Mundi. And if we're looking at it as far as energies, so Cancer is ruled by the moon. It's opposite. It's going to be a Saturn ruled sign, which is going to be Capricorn. Saturn was the traditional ruler of Aquarius. And so that's why we have it in Thema Mundi, because in Hellenistic astrology, Hellenistic astrology does recognize the outer planets, but it mostly focuses on the moon through Saturn. You can use the outer planets. The outer planets are more so used in modern astrology rather than Hellenistic astrology. But I think it's still important to to talk about this. So we have the two planets that are giving life or giving off light, opposed to the planet that essentially says, I'm eating life, I'm killing it off. We've got warm fuzzies over here with the luminaries. You've got the moon that's like mother and nurturing, and you've got the sun, which is like your energy, your drive, like your core light. And then you've got Saturn over here that's like the grumpy old man that's like, I don't want, get off my property. I don't want anything to do with anybody. And I just want to stay in my house. And so you've got those two opposing energies. And that's the way you can look at all of these, because the luminaries are always going to be opposite Saturn energies. And then on either side of the luminaries, you will always get a Mercury ruled sign. So taking this, on one side of Cancer is Gemini, and on the other side of Leo is going to be Virgo. So we're also listing out like orders that we're seeing, like a pattern that we're seeing. Mercury signs are always going to be opposite Jupiter ruled signs. So the way that I talk about this is that like Jupiter is kind of like Christmas. It's like kind of like Santa Claus or like Christmas dinner. You have a whole bunch of like generosity going on. People are laughing, people are drinking alcohol, people are having a good time. Nobody's like getting too serious. We're all just having fun. And then Mercury is like that cousin or that uncle that like believes in conspiracy theories and comes to dinner and wants to talk about politics and the church and all the things at Christmas dinner. That is, that is Mercury. Mercury wants to talk about, okay, but we're all here like enjoying all this wine and everything like that, but the government, that's essentially Mercury. Mercury wants to talk about debate. It wants to make decisions. It wants to argue a little bit. It wants to stir the pot a little bit. It wants to do all the things. Jupiter is like, let's just vibe, essentially. That is the difference between the two. If you remember, don't remember anything else, remember that Mercury wants to argue. Jupiter just wants to vibe. Because Jupiter is expansive. I just wanted to say expansive because that's literally what Jupiter does. It expands on things. But that also makes me think of, I don't know if anybody has watched the show Reign, which is the retelling of Mary Queen of Scots, but there's an episode, I think in like season 3, where Mary's mother, Marie de Guise, comes to visit. And Mary and Francis were like on the outs or whatever, because Francis had, I'm sorry, this is one of my tangents. Francis, I swear it has a point. Like Francis had a baby with one of Mary's ladies, and Marie de Guise heard about this and she ripped this poor girl to shreds verbally. And she was like, and then she went to talk to Mary. And she was like, you know, you need to have a baby, which ironically, Jupiter is also babies, but we'll get to that in the next handout, or like pregnancies. But she was like, you need to have a baby. And she was like, well, why don't you take this herb that my doctor prescribed to me? It was opium at that time. And so she was like, it'll put you in an expansive mood. That's always what I think of when I think about Jupiter. It's an expansive and you see like later in the episode, Lola, the girl that had the baby with Francis, ends up taking opium by accident. And she is in an expansive mood. She's like walking around the party. She's like, I love marzipan. Okay, tangent over. But yeah, she was just on a high. That is Jupiter. But anyway, so then we have Venus that is always going to be opposite Mars ruled signs. So Taurus is a Venus ruled sign. It's always going to be opposite a Mars ruled sign, which in this case is going to be Scorpio. Aries is opposite Libra. Aries is a Mars ruled sign. Libra is a Venus ruled sign. Venus and Mars, the difference between the two is going to be Venus wants harmony. It wants relationships. It wants to feel good. It's about pleasure. Mars is about cutting things off. It's about conflict, and it wants to fight. It's hot. Venus is literally very cool. It just wants things to be even keel. It doesn't want to rock the boat at all. Mars is all about rocking the boat. And so that is the difference between those. But it's good to know the difference between each energy, because when you're looking at like, when eventually we do get to interpreting charts, you'll need to know why, let's say, Venus in Aries is a not a hard interpretation to craft, but why Venus isn't acting in its normal Venus, like in its normal Venus behavior. Like if Venus were in Taurus, it would be very much Venus. It would be talking about like, I want relationships, I want beauty, I want pleasure. But Mars in Aries, Venus is in its opposite, it's is in a sign that's ruled by its opposite planetary energy. And so it's conflicted. We would call this, there's a whole like term for this, but all you need to know is that Venus in an opposite, a sign that's in its opposite planetary energy, it's hard for Venus to do its usual Venus-like things. And this can cause some issues with interpretation. And so it's not going to act the same. But that's why I also bring this, like the planetary energies up. It's not just important to understand the difference, like with the signs and how they oppose each other, but it's more, I almost say even more important to understand how the planetary energies oppose each other and why they're different. But it can also be very helpful for understanding where they kind of come together in the middle. And so that's the thema mundi for the intents and purposes of this lesson. Any questions on that? Okay. So this take-home exercise, you can do this if you want. If it's not your cup of tea, that's cool too. Honestly, we've done it in this class. What we've been talking about, this exercise is essentially just making sure that you understand how things kind of pair together. So in like kind of starting to make interpretations of things. So I put up here like, for an example, cardinal Earth is what we're kind of dissecting here. So from cardinal Earth, what do we know about it? Is it masculine or feminine? Well, we said that Earth is a feminine sign or is a feminine energy. And so we would automatically circle that it's feminine without even knowing what zodiac season or energy that we're talking about. Because it's feminine, that would mean that it expresses itself in a certain way. So again, at the time that I created this was like the best wording that I could come up with. If you want to use a different verbiage, you totally can. Because passive and like outwardly, I will admit, are not the best ways to like express that now, but but you could say, you know, it's because it's a feminine energy, that means that maybe it's a bit more behind the scenes, express a bit more behind the scenes, or it's a bit more subtle, whatever use of words you want to use. The mode of the element is cardinal, so it's like a two-part question. Mode of the element is cardinal, and so we would talk about what does that mean. You can definitely use the definitions that I've given. I promise you it's not cheating. That's why I put the whole like handout together with all the definitions. So you can use those if you wanted to do this exercise. And that's all we're doing here, is essentially we're just making sure that we're understanding all parts. And then it's like kind of like a little mini quiz, I guess. But yeah, just kind of putting those together. And then I think like the last part of the question, yeah, I was like, there was definitely another part of the question. The element is earth. Using the interpretation or the definitions that I gave, what would be like your insights on this? And then bonus, if you kind of are able to put it all together. So the way that I would put this all together is, yes, okay, so it's an earth sign that we're talking about. So it's feminine, so it's a bit more subtle. And so whatever planet rules over this energy sign, whatever, we're talking about the feminine expression of it, even though we haven't gotten to planets yet. It's cardinal as well. And so it's going to be more about action, pushing something forward. It's going to be bold, because I think I also say that in the handout. We just kind of skipped over it because I'm just talking now. But it's going to be bold. It's going to be a bit more power driven. It's going to be action oriented. So it's dynamic. But we have to put that together with Earth. That's a bit more subtle. And if we put that together, then we get an energy that is very strategic about when it decides to pipe up. Or it's very strategic about when it decides to take action. Because remember, we said that Earth is partially action, but it's action for a purpose, to create something new, because it's feminine. So feminine energy likes to create stuff. Not that masculine energy can't do that, but it's more, masculine energy is more going to be about the action. More like I always think about it like the arrow, like the cutting of things, or like the shooting things. But it's, or like the momentum. There we go. That's what I was looking for. But then, so we would just put all of those thoughts together to make that cardinal earth sign, and we would have an energy that decides when it's going to act in like a very purposeful way. And so we could even take that even further and say that it likes to reserve its energy for what is maybe most important. It's not just acting out on any and everything. So it would be no surprise that, spoiler, the cardinal earth sign that we're talking about is Capricorn. And Capricorn definitely does that. It's not just acting on everything. It's going to decide what is it going to act on, what is it going to create, and it's going to be very intentional about it. And that is like the thing that I think is at this point of the lesson is really important, and why I was talking about stereotypes that I think a lot of times are talked about with astrology. And the whole point of this course is not to just pull on those stereotypes, because then we could also get into the fact that, yes, is Capricorn, oftentimes, what's the stereotype about Capricorn? That they're stoic. I have met some extremely emotional Capricorns. I have met Capricorns that, most Capricorns, I think, are a complete mess, at least when they're young, before they've learned how to like get it all together. And then even afterwards, some of them are still a mess. Anyway, but I'm like, that's a stereotype, is that they have it all together and they're very business oriented. They don't have any creativity and they're stoic. But that's not true. Let's see. Yes, they are definitely mini crabs. They I'm not going to go on a tangent right now, but we will get there, because there's definitely a middle ground between the opposite signs, where essentially we're talking about the same energy. It's just expressed two different ways. But for the intents of this lesson, we've got this cardinal earth energy that loves to express itself in a way that's just very intentional, and it likes to have a plan on how it's going to, because again, it's going to conserve its energy, and so it likes to have a plan. But if we were just going off stereotypes, we'd say, yeah, Capricorns always have a plan, like it's just ingrained in them. Well, where is that ingrainment coming from is what I want us to make sure that we're understanding. It's not just because it's Capricorn, it's because Capricorn is built off of these base energies. And that'll be important when we start doing like interpretations of like different transits, horoscopes, charts, all those things. And so that's what this whole like take home thing is essentially just asking that over and over and over again. So if you want to do that on your own time, you are free to do that. I'm going to move on to probably like my favorite handouts of this whole lesson, because I love talking about the planets. There's a lot of jargon on these. Again, I apologize. I'll pick out what I think is most important, but these lists are my favorite, because eventually you guys will be able to add stuff the more that, and I think also when we're talking about astrology is not, you can only learn so much about astrology from books. A lot of what you're going to learn from astrology is from your own life, and just kind of observing. And I think that might be where a lot of people start to fall off on learning astrology, is if you're not somebody that likes to observe life actively, then astrology learning it might be a hit or miss for you, because I think it takes a lot of observation. And we'll talk about that as we go throughout this. So let's talk about the sun. The sun is constancy. It means a whole lot of other things, but I bring up primary motion. Primary motion essentially means there's nothing new under the sun. It's about constancy. The sun is about like things staying the same, which is very different when we get to talk about the moon, which is secondary motion, which is a whole other thing. Primary and secondary motion are two things that I won't get into right now because I don't have the astronomical like software to show you what it means. But when we're talking about the sun, we're talking about what stays the same. The sun is also going to be, as far as significations, it can be your energy. It can be, some people like talk about it as if it's your character or like the things that drive you. I don't know if it's your character, but I would say it's like one of your major like driving forces. It's the thing that your soul is looking to achieve in life. And so like I'll use almost like a personal example, and hopefully this makes sense. When I was like, and this is gonna like age me so bad and make me sound so silly, because now I look back at it and I'm like, Micah, what were you thinking? When I was in high school, about to go to college, I was convinced that I wanted to be a mother. I was convinced. So I made sure that I ate a certain way. I made sure that I worked out a certain way, all for that sole focus of me one day being a mom. I really wanted to be a mom, but everything I did, every breath I took was dedicated to that. That is your sun sign. That everything that you are doing is coming from that sun sign in some way, shape, or form. You can have a whole lot of other stuff in side quests happening. And that's kind of how you can look at like the other planets in your chart. Is there the other, like, it's almost like how, like if the sun is literally at the center of it all, then the other planets are kind of like how you get there. You can think about it that way. Because every chart will have a theme. You will start interpreting somebody's chart and certain themes will keep coming up, just in different colors, if that makes sense. But the sun, I'm bringing it all back to like what I was saying. The sun is going to be, you can think about it as kind of like your driving force. That one, or that those themes that your soul just keeps kind of trying to act out or go after in that stylized way, wherever your sun is like situated in your chart. Your soul's calling could be like how you think about it. Hopefully one of those metaphors makes sense. Anyway, so then you have some significations that we see with the sun are going to be your core purpose, your goals, your character, even leadership. Let's see. So I'm a Pisces. I'm the Pisces sun. Yes, and Taurus moon. Yes, absolutely. I definitely even I think definitely like the Taurus moon, because we'll get into this as well. I don't think, will we get into, we might get to that one where we talk about daytime and nighttime charts, because depending on if you have a daytime chart or a nighttime. Oh yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm a Pisces sun, Capricorn rising, and Taurus moon. Definitely, but I'm a nighttime chart as well. And so actually a lot of what comes out the most is going to be my Taurus moon. It's like my moon kind of has a spotlight. If you have a daytime chart, your sign is going to be like the one with the megaphone. If you have a nighttime chart, your moon's going to be more the one with the megaphone. But we'll get to that in like, I think a couple handouts, if not the next handout. But yes, so then the leadership, authority figures, and kings are also going to be signified or like represented by sun energy. Empires and like how you achieve them, effigies, statues, portraits, even like literally like crowns on your head or hats, as well as like your hair, also sun related. Or no, I take that back, not your hair. That's more of a Leo thing. Or I guess it could also be a Venus thing, depending on why you're talking about your hair. But like your head is gonna be some sun stuff. Yes, yes, I agree, Robin. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. um, so we have portraits, crowns. Um, it's what you can be seen or like known for, like like some of like your big not themes, because people have themes, but like yeah, we'll just say I'm having a brain fart right now. What you're known for or seen as, like if you're seen as like if you're like a Gemini, you're seen maybe as somebody that is just very mentally, you're a thinker, like archetype, there we go. Your sun is your archetype essentially, and that's what I was trying to say, like what you're seen as or known for. Yeah, the archetype. And it's like the sun is also going to be what's constant. The sun can also be seen as God, fame, high priest, the color yellow or gold, the color, as well as like gold, the metal. Barley and wheat are both represented by sun energy. Anything bitter in taste. Intelligence, not necessarily intelligence like how smart you are, but it's more like your focus, or like the things that like it's like that aha moment is what I'm talking about. Not necessarily like your day-to-day intelligence, but like that eureka moment is what I'm talking about. And maybe like intelligence wasn't the best word for that. Maybe I should have just put down eureka moment, but it's like what becomes illuminated for you. Oh wait, I did put that. The light that brings inspiration and illumination. I need to read. See, this is why I needed to like, I need to come up with like a good balance of reading my own stuff and like just talking off script. But it can also be the father and the man of the house. And so the sun is going to be everything that is masculine. It is the masculine luminary that all the other masculine planets are kind of like taking from. So if you read tarot, or at least this is how I learned tarot, is that all of the kings in all the suits essentially derive most of like all of their energy. I'm gonna back up there. So the emperor is like the main archetype that the four kings are just kind of like taking different personalities. I think about it, if you ever watch Teen Titans, that episode where Raven divvied herself up into like four different parts of her personality. I don't know if I'm aging myself here, but like where she was Raven as like a whole, but then like she had the pink Raven that was like super sweet and like flirty. And then she had the red Raven, the red side of her, which was like very like angry and like conflict driven and very aggressive. That's how I kind of learned tarot, is like the four kings are essentially just like divvied up energies of the emperor. That's the same thing that's happening with the sun with other masculine planets. You'll get a lot of overlap that's happening like with Mars and the sun, even though Mars is its own thing for sure. Mars is still going to do some of the same things that the sun does. And when you see sun, Mars, like the sun and Mars energies get together, they're causing a lot of the same thing. It's a little bit of an overload because both of those, what they have in common is energy. Mars has a lot of energy, the sun is giving energy. And so they're just kind of like going back and forth, going back and forth there. But if we also think of like, I don't know if Saturn would be a good one. Jupiter and the sun also, a lot of the same thing. Jupiter is very expansive. It's expansive in the same way that the sun touches everything. The sun is also very expansive as well, but it's also in the center of everything. Jupiter loves being in the center of everything, and just kind of radiating its light out to things. And so we get some of the same themes, just in a different font, or just in a different color. Sorry, my dog is moving my desk. Can you please go sit over there? Oh, well, we're being sassy today. Okay. Okay, so we have, for parts of the body that the sun is going to be ruling over, we have the head, the right eye, the torso, the heart, literally the breath that you breathe, the air that you breathe, and your nerves as well. Nerves come up, I think, quite a few times in different astrology books, like ruled by different planets, but the sun is going to be a major one that is going to rule over the nerves. The sun is the divine masculine energy, like we said, and then it rules over Leo. Each luminary is only going to rule over one sign. So the sun is a luminary, it's the masculine luminary, it rules over only Leo. And then we have, as for the correspondence for house rulership in modern astrology, the sun is associated with being associated, it's like associated with the fifth house. I want to stress right now that the fifth house, Leo, and the sun are completely different energies. It can get, I think, a bit confusing for people sometimes when they're trying to talk about houses, and they're thinking, oh, it's the same thing as Leo. That is not true. It's also not true that the sun and the fifth house are the same thing either. The fifth house is about self-expression, and the sun is the energy and your soul's purpose. And so there's some gray area in there, but they are not the same thing. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused, is that they'll start putting sun attributes and just saying that's the fifth house. And that's not true, because we have to remember that houses are just areas of life that we're talking about. And planets are more like the how something is acted out in that area of life. So I just want to stress, because in modern astrology, that gray area gets even bigger. And that's like my gripe, one of my biggest gripes. A lot of astrologers' biggest gripes. But also something that it might take some time to make sure that you're remembering when interpreting charts is that the fifth house, Leo, and the sun, or whatever house you're talking about, are not going to be the same. They might have things in common, but they are not the same as the planetary energy or the sign that is in the same order. Just because Leo is the fifth sign in the zodiac does not mean that it means the same thing as the fifth house. And just because Leo is ruled by the sun does not mean that the sun means the same thing as the fifth house, or the fifth house means the same thing as the sun. Just remember that. But for the intents and purposes of kind of understanding the general energy, I put that here. The house rulership correspondence in modern astrology, not Hellenistic astrology, is going to be with the fifth house. But just remember that differentiation. It takes the sun about 30 days to get through one sign. And then we are moving on to the moon, which is going to be all about change. Where the sun is about constancy, the moon is about change. And some of the things that we can see with the moon are going to be, the rulerships that we see with the moon are going to be the physical body. It's our habits, it's conception, cohabitation. It's even like your own private space and house. The biggest thing is change. Wherever the moon is in somebody's chart, or whatever sign it's in, there is some sort of change happening there. Especially when we're talking about, like, if the moon is in somebody's like if it's moving through somebody's houses, some sort of change is happening there, even natally. You can see like where somebody might have the most change in their life. Like I've had a client who had her moon in her 10th house. Off rip, what I could say is that she changes careers quite often, and she does. But that is something that I think you can, when reading somebody's chart, you can automatically tell where they have a lot of change in their life because of where their moon is at. We have a question. Yes. Having moon in the 7th, oops, sorry. I clicked off of the thing. Hold on. Having moon in the 7th is, I guess, like a bit of a blessing and a curse, because I imagine that moon in the 7th, one, it makes you a very helpful person, somebody that cares to nurture other people quite a bit. Whether it's reciprocated or not, it might be the problem, depending on each person's chart. But it definitely says that you're there for other people, or you show up for other people. But it can also mean that, yeah, there's a lot of change happening when it comes to relationships. There's always transition. People just kind of come and go when you have like moon in the 7th. And then moon in the 8th is a whole other thing. It's like a whole other ballpark. That's change on top of change, because the 8th house is already where we see a lot of transformation, a lot of death and rebirth happening. And then you're putting on like the emotional part of the moon in a house that's already very, I don't want to say like emotional, but the 8th house, like it triggers a lot of emotion because of what it stands for. The 8th house is about like trauma, crisis, taxes, all the things that stress us out basically are in the 8th house. And then you have the moon there. It's like putting a baby in front of a lion, or putting a baby in a lion's den. That's how I think about the 8th house. But let's see. Yep, both are true. Then we have, oh, here we go. So we had cohabitation, we have marriage, the goddess, the mother, nurses, queens, the woman of the house, possessions, fortune. So basically like not like large amounts of money. It doesn't have to be large amounts of money, but it can just be like the money that you make and the money that you spend. What the money that's coming in and out of your pocket is essentially what I mean here. Cities, or large gatherings of people, like communities, things like that. Appearances. So like the moon is like just very like almost like universal. That's why when we're talking about like how, again, I'm going to use like not an example, but I have on my TikTok, I have an ongoing like forever series called Lunar Lowdowns, where I talk about the moon, since the moon moves so quickly throughout different signs, what is happening like for the next 2.5 days. But it applies to everybody. It might hit you a little different depending on your chart and what the moon is triggering for you, but it'll always be very universal. And that's why you say large gatherings of people. So essentially the collective is still very much a moon thing. Because again, it's a luminary. Just like the sun is a luminary and is going to affect everybody, the moon is also going to affect everybody, because it's a life planet, or life. Yeah, it's a life planet. We all are living, hopefully, listening to this. And so it applies. Appearances. So like when we're talking about appearances, those can be like false appearances, or just kind of like what we want people to see. It might not be authentic, because we have to remember that the moon it doesn't have its own light. It's reflecting the light that the sun gives it. And so it's kind of like the answer to the sun's words. So it's that reactionary kind of thing. And so the moon can be a lot about change. So it doesn't have, so the moon can be like how we react or how we show up in reaction to other people. And so that's what I mean by appearances, not like physical appearances. So like trying to keep up appearances for other people. Maybe I should put that in quotation marks. Where did I leave off? Oh, money spent and money gained, homes, boats, travel, and wanderings. So like if you think about like literally like wandering, like how a crab goes, like how it crab walks, it walks side to side, not in a straight line. That like, so it's essentially it's wandering. It's taking way longer to get to where it's supposed to be because it's not going in a linear line. It's just kind of wandering until it gets there. The color light green is ruled by the moon. Silver, the metal, as well as the color. Glass, salty, anything salty in taste. Yeah, we have parts of the body that the moon is going to rule over is going to be the left eye, the breast, the stomach, the spleen, the membranes, and bone marrow are also going to be ruled by the moon as well. The moon is the divine feminine. And so, like, if we use the tarot example again, the moon would be the empress. Technically, the moon in the tarot is the high priestess or just the moon card. But we're just talking about feminine energy. Since we use the emperor for the kings, we're going to use the empress for the queens if we divvy those up. But so the moon is going to be the divine feminine in astrology, and you'll see some of these same rulerships come up when we talk about like Venus. Even when we get to some of the outer planets, you start to see some crossover in rulerships as well. Let's see, the moon also only rules over one sign, which is going to be Cancer. And in modern astrology is associated with the fourth house because the moon is going to be like your emotions. Cancer is emotional, or as a water sign, it's associated with emotions, but it's not the same thing. Being emotional and being the ruler of emotions, two different things. But I think like another like difference we can like kind of draw is that the moon is going to be remembrance and like memory. But the fourth house is not memory. It's about ancestry. So you could see where those two things could easily mesh together, but they're not the same thing. And so just remember that as like, again, a good example of they're not the same thing. I'm going to keep saying that. But it takes the moon 2.5 days to get through one sign. So the moon just moved into Taurus today, like a couple hours ago. So this would be the first day, or like the first half day that the moon is in Taurus. And so the moon will go into Gemini on the 20, like late the 26th, going into the 27th, which is the new moon in Gemini. We have, so I put a note in here. Both the sun and moon are called luminary. Oh, we already went through that. Okay, so Mercury is the next planet that we're going to talk about. Do I want to say this before or after Mercury? Let's say it before. Mercury in mythology is often depicted as being androgynous. In I think some like alchemical texts, it's even associated, or it's even like Mercury is even drawn as a hermaphrodite. But the point is that Mercury is kind of like, out of planets and planetary energies, Mercury is kind of like neutral. And I say this because in the next handout, we're going to start talking about what's called sect. It's not in this one. No, it's not in this one. In the next handout, or after we stop talking about the planets, what comes after that is what's called sect. And Mercury is the only planet that kind of is a blank slate. All the other planets have a very clear line that they stand on when we start talking about sect and day and nighttime charts. So that's why I bring that up. So just kind of file that for later. Mercury, it's going to be the ruler of, so Mercury is neither masculine nor feminine as far as the planetary energy goes. Mercury rules over education, intellect, communication, brotherhood, translation, explanations, messengers, announcements, counting, and mathematics, voting, games, secrets, secret acts of stealth, fraud, surprises, theft. Be very careful when we're talking about the new moon in Gemini that's coming up, because I've already seen quite a few things that I'm like, I said that in my recorded video. Sharing is going to be a Mercury thing as well. Discoveries, students and followers, hearing, diversity. So hearing can literally be like your hearing, but it also can be like court hearings as well, depending on like the context of like what's happening with Mercury. Critical thinking, diversity, forethought, decisions, and the process of making them. Accountants, architects, as well as astrology can even go under Mercury. We'll see astrology again when we talk about Uranus. Students, sculptures, astrology students, that's what I meant. But you could also say astrology as well because of like just the complexity of astrology. I guess that would just be a different aspect of astrology, but astrology students, sculptors, doctors, teachers, musicians, and lawyers. Arguments and debate, copper, and coinage. So funny thing, as we're talking about the new moon in Gemini that's coming up, that's ruled by Mercury. I saw an article that the Treasury Department is discontinuing the making of pennies. And I remember when I was making this video, I was like, I should put that in there. But I was like, but who wants to hear about possibly pennies going out of pennies going out of or not being, nobody making pennies anymore. I should have put that in there because it was very much a Mercury. It's a very Mercury new moon that we have coming up. But both copper and coinage, and we have a copper pennies are made out of copper. Anyway, that was another tangent. But parts of the body that Mercury is going to be the ruler of are your hands, your shoulders, your fingers, joints, windpipes, your tongue, as well as your intestines. And then Mercury is going to be the first planet that in our handout that is going to be the ruler of two different signs. So you have the feminine expression and the masculine expression. So Gemini is going to be the masculine expression of Mercury, and then Virgo is going to be the feminine expression. With the corresponding house rulership in modern astrology, at least, is going to be the third house and the sixth house. It takes Mercury roughly 2 months, 2 weeks to 2 months to get out of one sign. If it's not retrograding, it takes it about 2 weeks to get through one sign from start to end. If it retrogrades, then, and this includes like if, like we just had a Mercury retrograde a couple months ago, because Mercury is retrograding like 3 to 4 times out of the year. Basically quarterly. But we had a Mercury retrograde, I think, where it started. Did it start in Aries and then go back? Let's say, for all intents and purposes, it started in Aries and then it went back into Pisces. So Mercury was already in Aries. Let's say it went to like 8 degrees of Aries. And then it retrograded, went back into Pisces. And yes, it's in Pisces now. But now when it goes direct in Pisces, it has to start all over again. And now it's in Aries again. And then it has to finish its transit in Aries before it goes on to Taurus. So by the time that happens, Mercury's been in Aries, in the sign of Aries, for 2 months. Or it hasn't left Aries for about 2 months, essentially. Like it took a little detour into Pisces. but it was not able to leave that Aries energy officially until about 2 months had passed. So that's why that 2 months is there, why there's such a big gap in time, 2 weeks and 2 months. I just wanted to explain that. Retrogrades happen essentially like every three months. Sometimes we get 4 Mercury retrogrades. Sometimes we get 3. It depends on like if we started a year with a Mercury retrograde, like when the first Mercury retrograde of the year happened. And then that'll just like create like different, a different like timing on how many Mercury retrogrades that year we get. But it happens often is the takeaway. Let's see. We'll get back to this homework. I just want you to familiarize yourself with like the glyphs for each. Did I put the, yes, I put the glyphs for all the planets on the handout. Just familiarize yourself with the glyphs. If anything, make sure you do that because you'll need that when you start looking at charts. Mars. Mars is our first planet that is very much on one side of the line and others, and then others, or is on one side of, is on, what am I trying to say here? Mars is going to be the first planet that we talk about in this class that is not going to be neutral. The sun and moon, I don't really count as like being planets per se. They're luminaries, which technically are different, but I call them planets anyway. Mars is going to be our first planet that's not neutral. Mercury was neutral. Mars is not. Mars is actually what's called a malefic. Malefics essentially, so here's what they do. Malefics corrupt things. They say no to things and they tear things apart. Malefics don't always do bad things. You have to take into account what is, like if you say no to something, sometimes no can be a bad thing. We don't like to hear no. But if a planet is saying no to a fee that you have to pay, that's a good thing. But if it's saying no to, if you get, accepted into a program, then that's a bad thing. It really all depends on what is happening that the malefic is saying no to. And so while it's called the malefic and malefics have that signification of like, I am, tearing things apart and all that, then, oh yeah, okay, gotcha. Yes, Melissa, I will be doing a whole like thing on Saturn and Aries, or I think I did a couple of videos on Saturn and Aries on TikTok already. But yes, that is going to be a very interesting transit for sure. Saturn does not like being in Aries at all. I wish that I would have read this message before Robin left. I would have said, yeah, it's okay. Don't want anybody hurting. Okay, so yeah, so Mars is going to be violence. It's going to be acts of force. And then, yes, find me on TikTok. I'll type it in. Let me just make sure that I have, there we go. I will put it in on TikTok. I am even Astrology on TikTok. Okay. So Mars is going to be acts of violence or acts of force, violence, wars, battles and fights, robberies, screams, cries. So you can already see why Mars is called a malefic. Adultery, marriage, in, I guess, I don't know, the old days. That's the only way I know how to like put it. In a much more like black and white time where people had a very rigid mindset. Mars was thought of as the significator of marriage for women. Obviously, I do not follow that that same perspective, but it is just good to know, especially when you're talking to older astrologers, they might bring that up. So I'm just putting it out there. Marriage, banishment, estrangement. Also coming back to the marriage thing, Jupiter rules marriage anyway. And so marriage, while Mars can rule like one, and this is also why I was talking about like the masculine planets, you can see some like transfer over on rulerships for some of them. Marriage is definitely one of them. Because the sun also technically could create like marriage things. As can Jupiter and Mars at one point had the signification of marriage. Banishment, estrangement from one's parents, captivity, abortion. So essentially, whenever something's being cut off, Mars is gonna rule it. Especially if so like, and I brought this up for like abortion because you're literally like essentially severing a fetus from the womb. And so we have abortion, rape, sex, lies, hopeless situations, anger, lawsuits, fevers and ulcers, inflammation, Masons. So Masons is like a neutral thing that Mars rules over. Military service, soldiers, hunting, poor vision, internal bleeding, blood, seminal passages, bile, pooping, iron, wine, legumes, the color red, and anything pungent in taste. And then for body parts, it's going to be the back. So not just like the back of your torso, but like the back of your head to the back of your toes, or like the back of your feet. So that whole backside is ruled by Mars. The butt, and also genitalia, more so like male genitalia, because Mars is going to be more about like the penetrating genitalia, so it's going to be like more male oriented. But then that's why we get like with sex, we literally have Venus and Mars coming together on a lot of like marketing stuff. For the feminine and masculine expression of Mars, we have Aries as the masculine expression of Mars, and then Scorpio as the feminine expression of Mars. And in modern astrology, we're going to associate Mars's energy loosely with the first house and the eighth house. It takes Mars about 2 months to 6 months to travel through one sign. And so 2 months if it doesn't retrograde at all, 6 months if it does retrograde. And then Mars retrogrades every 2 years. And so we are coming up on, so in 2026, we'll have a Mars retrograde because we had a Venus retrograde at the beginning of this year. And so actually we, this whole, like the beginning of this year was interesting because we had just finished a Mars retrograde that started in 2024 and finished in February, I do believe, of 2025. But then, like, I think a couple weeks after that, we had Venus retrograde happen. But Venus retrograde, it's a Venus retrograde year. Last year was a Mars retrograde year. So Mars retrograde is going to be in 2026. Venus rules over desire. Sorry. Okay, I had to make sure that I read everything for Mars because I just jumped right into Venus because I said Venus retrograde. So I thought, okay. Anyway, Venus is the next planet that we're talking about. Venus, unlike Mars, is what's called a benefic. Sorry, my dog was eating his blanket and I'm like, what are you doing? We've got Venus, which is a benefic. Benefics, they put things together. They say yes to things. They create harmony for the most part. It depends on what they're saying yes to. That is the deciding factor on whether they do good things. Generally, they do good things, but that doesn't mean that they always do good things. Again, like if a benefic is saying yes to a fee that you have to pay, then a benefic becomes a bad thing. Again, it just depends on what are they saying yes or no to. that is the deciding factor, because Jupiter, that we'll talk about, I think next, is literally, it's called the Great Benefic, but Jupiter expands on things, which is usually, I guess, a good thing. But again, if Jupiter is expanding on a bill that you have to pay, then that's a bad thing. But if it's expanding on what you're receiving from somebody, like resources that you're receiving from somebody, or that somebody's paying you, then it's a good thing. But Venus is our first benefic that we encounter. She rules over desire, love, overall, whether it's platonic, romantic, whatever, it's going to be Venus ruled. Mothers and nurses, divine blessings, or like generosity, or just kind of like gifts that are given to you. Fortune, so like, again, like gifts, resources that are given. Reciprocity of fortune or generosity, partners, parties, elegance and refinement, sacred offices like priesthoods and things like that, and just kind of like benefactors that give back to the community. Riches, fashion, companionship, security, not like security like workers, but like financial like security, or the things that make you feel safe and comfortable. Consumerism, marriage, the arts, beauty, perfume makers, cosmetologists, cleanliness and elegance, supply chain management and managers, shops, animals of the sea, charisma, and favorable reputations. Sex is like the union of the genitalia, but it can also be like a woman's genitalia as well. Pleasure, precious stones, olive, both the color, but mostly just the olive, the food. The color white, anything oily in taste. Parts of the body that Venus is going to rule over is going to be the face, the lips, the neck, the nose, the whole front from head to toe, and your lungs as well. Venus is going to be the ruler of Taurus and Libra, Taurus as the feminine expression, and then Libra as the masculine expression. And then in modern astrology, it's associated with the second and the seventh house. And it takes Venus about 2 months to 4 months to get out of one sign if it retrogrades. If it retrogrades, it's 4 months. If not, it's 2 months. And it retrogrades every year and a half. Then we have, I guess, like a different set of planets, which is like the transpersonal planets, which essentially just means that they're moving a bit slower than all of the planets that we've covered so far. And they're a bit more, I guess, transpersonal. They're not generational, but they do stay at least a year in one sign. And the first one that we're talking about is Jupiter. So Jupiter is going to be the ruler of pregnancy, childbirth, desire. Also, we said it's another benefic. It's called the Great Benefic. Desire, love, alliances. Actually, I should have crossed out love. It's not necessarily that Jupiter is love. Again, it's more like vibes and like the ability to come together with people. It's just kind of like a benefic energy. It's like almost like backing up Venus when it comes to just kind of like that friendly environment of being able to connect with others. So I should probably cross love out of there and just keep alliances. And so I'll have to edit that. But friends in high places, profit, salary, fees, income, and all the abundance of these things, whether it's positive or negative. Justice, authority figures, especially authority figures, like when we're talking about like more political, not just like Jupiter can stand in as like your boss, I suppose. I would think your boss is more like a Saturn thing, but Jupiter is definitely authority figures like on a more collective level, like political leaders. But I just wanted to differentiate that. And then we've got government, honors, or like rewards and things like that, or like being publicly honored for something. Popes, heads of holy places or temples, trust funds, inheritances, adoption, freedom, wealth, the colors that range from gray to cream or off-white, tin, and sweet tasting things. Venus sometimes also is also sweet tasting things, even though Venus is a bit more broad. Venus isn't just sweet tasting things. It's going to be, I think, just anything that's like pleasurable, whether it's in your mouth or not. But if we're talking about food, Venus is more indulgent, not just sweet, but Jupiter definitely is things that taste sweet. Parts of the body are going to be the outer thighs, the feet, semen, the womb, as well as the liver. And then Jupiter is going to be the ruler of both Sagittarius and Pisces. The masculine expression of Jupiter is going to be Sagittarius, and then Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces, even though Neptune later comes in and is a co-ruler of Pisces. Jupiter was the traditional ruler of Pisces, and therefore Pisces is the feminine expression of Jupiter. And in modern astrology, it's associated with the 9th and 12th house. It takes Jupiter a year and some change, or like give or take, to get out of one sign. And it retrogrades once a year for about like 4 months, give or take. The next one we have is Saturn. And we actually might finish up all the planets before we're all done here today. Okay, so we have Saturn, which is going to be our next malefic, because after this, when we talk about outer planets, the outer planets kind of like teeter on both sides of being malefic and benefic. They can do both. They're kind of like a gray area, even though I will definitely say that some of them weigh more on the malefic side, but you'll see what I mean in a second. Saturn rules over pettiness, envy, maliciousness, anxiety, self-depreciation, loners, liars, those who play a part for appearances, harshness, strictness, gloominess, and misery, tears, accusations, orphans, being orphaned, sailors and those that practice waterside trades, sailing, seafaring, depression, sluggishness, inaction, long-lasting punishments, obstacles, secrets, restraints. Hold on a second. Did I say for Jupiter? I just thought about it. Jupiter is also like your beliefs as well as like your philosophies in life. Sorry, I just thought about that. That should have been on there, and I was like, I don't feel like I said that. But Jupiter is also going to be your beliefs and philosophies that you kind of carry in life, or change even. Either way, it's your belief system. Tears, accusation, blah, 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 obstacle, long-lasting punishments, obstacles, secrets, restraints, limitations, imprisonment, soil, farmers and gardeners, tax collectors, violent actions, earned rank. So it's like the work that you have to put in to get esteem from others or to get respect from other people, or at least a title or authority rank. Lead, wood, stone, phlegm, so like all the heavy things are ruled by Saturn. Phlegm, lymph, single people, widows, gout, cough, illness, dropsy, convulsions, depravity, death by water, so drowning, tumors, dysentery, the color dark brown, and anything astringent in taste are ruled by Saturn. So Saturn, definitely not the funnest planet that we have. Definitely not the fun. Yeah, definitely not the funnest planet that we have. We could see why it gets such a bad reputation, but when we start to look at the parts of the body that Saturn rules over, we kind of need Saturn, because the parts of the body that it rules over are going to be our kidneys, our skeletal system, skin, and the bladder. And I think that's something that we can already remember right now. Saturn is necessity at its core. It's like what is necessary. it's not the funnest planet to work with, but it does boil things down to what is needed so that we can build up from the ground up. And we can go on a whole like a lot of different side quests on Saturn. I think like Saturn is like one of my favorite planets, ironically, to talk about, because I think it is like pigeonholed a lot of times for being such a crotchety old man. And he is a crotchety old man, essentially. But there's a lot of other avenues that we can look at Saturn at as well that we'll do that maybe another time. But yeah, all those things we need: kidneys and skeletal system, muscles. We'd be a pool on the floor without any Saturn. Saturn is structure. Saturn has its two expressions in Capricorn and Aquarius. Capricorn as its feminine expression and Aquarius as its masculine expression. And then we see the houses associated with Saturn as being the 10th house, or things that it has in common with Saturn, as the 10th house and the 11th house. The travel time through the signs is going to be 2.5 years. And then it retrogrades approximately once a year for approximately 4 months. Sometimes, like now, Saturn, well, I guess even now, we'll say yes, with all of these, it's a give and take, like give or take for how long they stay in one sign, approximately. Because even with the sun, you might be a day off of 30 days. But you have Saturn, who technically, Saturn went into Pisces in March of 2023. Yeah, of 2023. It went into Pisces in March of 2023. And while it'll go into Aries on the 26th, so in 2 days, it will go back into Pisces in I think in September. I have to double check that, but it's either in September or October that it goes back into Pisces. But it'll stay in Pisces until March of 2026. And so we're seeing like it's doing like this little like hopscotch thing. So technically, in my mind, Saturn did a little extended stay in Pisces, and it was there for like 3 years. Well, at least for me, it's felt like 3 years, and I'm ready for Saturn to leave. But so we just say like give or take. But if we're talking like Saturn was in Pisces, how long it's been in Pisces until it went back into Aries, technically, yes, that's 2.5 years. But it's going to go back into Pisces and then stay there until March of 2026. So I say 3 years. Anyway, and so that is all of the traditional, like, I guess, inner planets. We'll I thought we could get through we can get through these. Okay, we're going to go through the outer planets and then we'll be done. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So all the things we talked about with Venus, Neptune just ups it a bit. So we have, and then of course it has its own significations as well, but Neptune is called the higher octave of Venus. And all of the outer planets are essentially a higher octave of a planet that we've already talked about, which is why in Hellenistic astrology, they're not mentioned as much, but they are recognized for some things. But we have ambushes, chaos, covert alliances, deception and lies, deceptive schemes, ventures, because Neptune is all the things that you don't see. Trends and movements, mobs and mob mentality, desire, disguises, dreamers and dreams, imagination, false hope, success or failure that comes through women in particular, horses, psychics, exile, pessimism, secret societies, social unrest, sudden death, wandering, sleep, poetry, dance, harmony, rhythm, emotions and feelings, intuition, poison, viruses, stringed instruments, addiction, alcohol, drugs, anemia, energy depletion. Oh, a funny story about anemia, just kind of like, since this is being recorded. So when Neptune was about to leave Pisces, and it was about to go into Aries, which Aries is a Mars rule sign, which we talked about. Mars is the ruler of blood. I found out, and I'm also like obviously like a Pisces sign. I found out that I was anemic, which I thought was an interesting like way for Neptune to show up, like as it's leaving its own sign and going into a sign that's ruled by a planet that talks about blood. I found out that I was anemic. But then we also see, kind of just like moving on from that story, but I just wanted to put that out there. Energy depletion and burnout, nutrition, catalepsy, the sea, dolphins, connection to the divine. There we go. Parts of the body that Neptune is going to rule over is going to be the cerebral ventricles, spinal fluid, the pineal gland, nerve fibers, and optic nerves. So I said we would see nerves again. So the zodiac rulership for Neptune is it co-rules Pisces with Jupiter. So Neptune really only has one rulership, and it co-rules Pisces with Jupiter. It's associated with the 12th house in modern astrology, and it takes 14 years for Neptune to go through one sign, and it retrogrades once a year for about 5 months. I had to revise some of these outer planets because I realized that I was wrong on, I think, one of these, but I can't remember which one. And I had to go through these again and fix it. Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So from Uranus, we get some of the rulerships as being brilliance, inventions, originality, humanitarianism, science, technology, electricity, rebellion, sudden change, earthquakes and natural disasters, freedom, independence, intelligence, ideas, social justice, utopian ideals, the future. Really quick. Neptune also rules over cults as well, and like cult leaders too. Social justice, the future, or like at least, yeah, we'll say the future, because I'm like we'll say the future, because Aquarius is co-ruled by Uranus with Saturn, and so it's more like Aquarius is more like the ideal future that you have in mind. Because a lot of times I think that people think about Aquarius as it's like this, like, oh, like it's super progressive all the time. Aquarius is not super progressive all the time, because I think when people think progressive, they think like bettering like the future, or like bringing robots and like floating cars into the future, which for some people that could be progressive. But also Aquarius is what we're seeing right now. It's the ideal that people see a future becoming, whether that is taking parts of the past and bringing it into the future, or creating something completely new. Aquarius could be either one of those. And so we say for Uranus, it's just the future in general. It's kind of more of a blank slate. And then Aquarius becomes like, what does that ideal future look like for you? Is it like what we're seeing now, where we're seeing a lot of injustice and a lot of issues come in when we're talking about minorities? Because Uranus could also be like people that are in minorities as well. Or are we seeing like things that we've never seen before, like then be invented to replace what has been in the past? It's just the ideal that people imagine their future being, and that could be a range of things. Groups and communities, authenticity, satellites, radio waves, magnetic fields, computers. I was about to say Pluto. Dragonflies, the internet, social media, astrologers, icebergs, scientists, astronomers, and astrologers. I put astrologers twice. I should have deleted that. Politicians, pilots, archaeologists, anarchists, and parts of the body, that Uranus is going to be the ruler over is the ankles, the nervous system, bronchial tubes, diaphragm, the lungs, and the trachea. It co-rules Aquarius with Saturn. It's associated with the 11th house, and we see Uranus stay in one sign for about 7 years, and it retrogrades once a year for about 5 months. Lastly, we have Pluto, which is the higher octave of Mars. I always say that Mars, if we're talking about the difference between the two, Mars is kind of like the cop with anger issues. And then Pluto is like the detective that kind of like tries to be your friend and then like uses all your secrets against you and creates like just like lots of trauma mentally. It plays mind games, essentially. It plays on a lot of fear, death. So it's like the cop with the sadistic streak, but you don't know that yet. The thriller versus like the horror movie. Death, transformation, rebirth, psychiatrists, analysts, detectives, political underground, sewers and those that work in them. Pluto can also be oil too, because it's found underground. Recycling. Pluto can also be basements, since they're literally like subterranean. Undercover police, pathologists, volcanoes, subways, underground transport, snakes, desire, sexual abuse. Pluto can be any kind of abuse, but especially sexual abuse. Obsession, control, power, dominance, surgery, as well as needles are all ruled by Pluto. Parts of the body that Pluto rules over are going to be like genitalia in general. That's why we get like with Scorpio. Cell reproduction and the immune system functions are also going to be ruled by Pluto. It co-rules Scorpio with Mars as the traditional ruler. And then we associate Pluto with the 8th house. Pluto takes about 15 years to get through one sign, and then it retrogrades once a year for about 6 months. Okay, any questions for other planets? Okay. All right, this is where we're going to stop for today. And I hope I hope it's just you, Melissa. And so I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. And I will see you on Wednesday. Yes. Okay. All right. See you then. And let me stop share and then end it. Okay. Bye.